Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread of NFL.com. I'm joined by Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. The Talkin Tide podcast available to you at any app you prefer to get your podcast. You can also get it on Megaphone. We've got a YouTube channel. We're going live on Facebook now. We are plugged in everywhere for you here on the Talkin Tide podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Talkin_Tide. Links to all the podcasts go straight there, so be sure to click on that, follow as well. Want to thank our sponsors very quickly: Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa, North River Dental Associates, and of course, DraftKings. We'll tell you a little bit more about them later in the program. First, though, Travis, we take a look at Alabama's upset loss in College Station to Texas A&M. The final score, 41-38, a wild game, one of those crazy back and forth games that almost had too many big plays to talk about. We could zero in on 10 different things, really, if we wanted to, Travis. It was a wild one. At the end of the day, though, you got to tip your hat to Texas A&M. They outplayed Alabama, in my opinion. They outcoached Alabama. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the program. And they got the job done at home.
Yeah, it seemed like at every critical juncture in that game Saturday night, whenever Alabama looked like it might be ready to sort of do what Alabama seemingly always does, Texas A&M, to its credit, had an answer. And statistically, you look at the numbers, and it looks great for Alabama. But then you consider a couple of red zone field goals, a red zone turnover for the second straight week. This time it really bit Alabama in the buttocks. And look, mistakes here and there. Alabama still trying to clean up some things on the offensive side of the ball. Still a defense that commits too many penalties, especially on the back end. And even special teams had a critical mistake with the kickoff out of bounds there late in the fourth quarter. So team wins, team losses. I think this one goes in the category of a team loss. And that does include, by the way, I think something we're going to talk about maybe even from a coaching perspective.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think the best example of that Texas A&M answer that you're talking about came when Alabama blocks a punt for a huge touchdown that kind of gets them in the back in the game, maybe quiets that crowd a little bit, or would have quieted the crowd had A&M not turned around and taken the ensuing kickoff back 96 yards for a touchdown. So those two plays, two of the biggest plays in the game, just completely canceled each other out. And on the net, they did nothing for Alabama.
They didn't. And Devon Achane is a backup running back, supports Isaiah Spiller. And again, you look at numbers. Isaiah Spiller, 17 carries, 46 yards. Devon Achane, 7 carries, 34 yards. A&M doesn't rush for over 100 yards in the game, but Achane with the 96-yard kickoff return. Spiller had some big plays in the passing game, including the wheel route there late in the fourth quarter where you got Christian Harris and Jalen Armour-Davis tangled up in coverage. So, again, numbers, statistics can be deceiving, especially when you're looking at them from the losing team's perspective. But absolutely, A&M just and it kind of started. We talk about answering and things, but and we can go any which way you want to go with this: offense first, defense first. But even on the opening drive for A&M, Alabama did enough things not right on defense to help Zach Calzada gain some confidence. That's one thing you did not want to happen in this game if you were Alabama. You knew Spiller and Weidermeyer were going to be featured early. That's exactly the way it worked. And they were able to sort of ease out Calzada into the game. He gained confidence, and give the guy a lot of credit. Played a hell of a game.
He did. He jumped on Alabama with 2 touchdown passes in the first quarter. So that was a punch in the mouth out of the gate that obviously Alabama's not used to. And then at the end of the game, and he wasn't right either, because he took a shot to the lower extremities, to the knee, to the shin, whatever it was, and he was hurting at the end of the game for A&M, and yet he managed to put together that game-winning field goal drive. Prior to that, Alabama had a 3-and-out. So even at the end there, Alabama goes 3-and-out with a chance to move the ball and kick a field goal of its own. They can't get a first down. They kick it to A&M, who's got a gimpy quarterback, a confident one, as you said, but a gimpy one nonetheless, and he gutted it out. I mean, nothing but respect for what Zach Calzada did.
Absolutely. And look, I give a lot of credit to the Texas A&M offensive line. That's a group we talked about it last week. 2 true freshman starters, one at center, one at right tackle. It seemed like no matter what type of pressures Alabama tried to bring, they were not successful, whether it was 3-man rush, 4-man rush, bringing the extra guy with the blitz. Now, look, A&M didn't run it for a ton of yards like we talked about earlier, but when you combine receiving yards and the kickoff return for A-Chain, they got plenty of production out of their backs in the game Saturday night.
No doubt. I thought it was primarily defensive issues were key for Alabama. Definitely, there were some offensive concerns we'll get into as well. But the defense, the tackling, there were a lot of problems there for Alabama. Plenty for Nick Saban to fix, and some things for Nick Saban to look in the mirror about as well, Travis. And me personally, I saw 3 things in this game that were head scratchers for me from the Alabama coaching staff. One, sitting on 3 timeouts at the end of the first half when you've got a chance to maybe force a punt and get 3 points out of it at the end there, maybe even 7, who knows. But Jimbo Fisher had no interest in driving the field there with that last drive. He was more than happy to take it to the locker room. Nick Saban let him do it.
And you know why? You know why he was happy doing that? Because he's a Nick Saban guy.
Yeah.
What does Nick Saban do in that situation?
That's right.
Who did Jimbo Fisher learn at the feet of?
He let Jimbo be Nick right there, didn't he?
Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. When you're up 14 and you're inside your own 10 with 1:13 or so left, you take it to the half, just like Nick always does. So absolutely, Jimbo had no interest. Well, the way you were playing defense, you didn't want to take it. Bull.
Yeah.
Jimbo was, there was no one happier than Jimbo Fisher when he realized that Nick Saban wasn't going to burn those timeouts there.
He loved
with his team backed up inside his own 10 and 1 minute plus left to go.
You certainly could have keyed run first down and second down.
Yeah. Well, it was, I think A&M picked up 4 on first down. So you still got to burn one there on second and 6. And the explanation from Saban to CBS going into the half, he seemed almost surprised to get the question, which surprised me. I would think you'd almost have to expect it if you really are kind of in the moment about the situation. He seemed almost caught off guard by it. It was absolutely the question on the minds of everybody watching that football game Saturday night at that point. And, I had some people tell me, well, Nick always lets those timeouts, takes those timeouts to the half. Okay, well, is he always down 14 in the second quarter with the team backed up inside its own 10? How many always are we talking about in that particular situation?
Yeah, I thought his halftime explanation was kind of convoluted. I mean, he seemed a little out of sorts to me, frankly. I didn't even quite understand what he was trying to say, but but he's also used to a lot of softball, how do you feel kind of questions at halftime too. That might have been why he was a little taken off guard.
He thought he had, after Maria Taylor at the half or before kickoff of that Louisville game in Orlando back in 2018. I think he thought he had scared off maybe some poignant questions from the sideline reporters, but no. CBS
Jamie Erdahl
Jamie brought it. Yeah,
absolutely. The other thing I think a lot of Alabama fans were questioning was you got a 1st and goal from the 4-yard line in the second half. You throw it again. Hindsight's 2020. I get that. If one of those passes scores, nobody says a word. I get that too. However, Brian Robinson was wearing that Texas A&M defense out at that time. And I honestly, I don't know how you don't score if you run Brian Robinson between Evan Neal and Kendall Randolph off that left side. I don't know how you're not getting in. At least with if not on the first shot,
go unbalanced. How
two
many times have
shots.
we seen Alabama go unbalanced?
Yeah.
And bring in a guy like Robbie Oots at fullback on
Right.
top of that. They did it at Florida and walked in with Brian Robinson on a 4.5 foot play from about the 3, as you'll recall. So, no, wasn't crazy about it. I thought of you when they were going shotgun,
Yeah.
on some of
That's right.
those from the 1. So I had a Goodbread moment on those. But,
Yeah.
go under center, go unbalanced, go really heavy. If you can't get a yard on first down, then play action it on second down, release a couple of tight ends the other way, and should be easy money if they're loading up that much on the goal line on you and you can't get a yard. But yeah, I'm with you because, and I wrote this on Bama Online after the game, as that game wore on Saturday night, more and more, when you consider what he did against Ole Miss too, you got the sense that Brian Robinson in that moment was Alabama's best offensive player.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand earlier in the game, they got down there, gave him a couple of shots, didn't get in. Bryce gets picked off in the end zone by Damani Richardson. Big moment in the game. But to go 3 straight snaps on the situation you're talking about, it's a 1-score game ultimately. And you start talking about 2 red zone field goals where you had it point blank, not at the 18 and you had to kick field goals, but inside the 3 and you can't get in. And then the goal line turnover, the inside the 5 turnover. I mean, we can talk about a lot of sequences, like you said from the outset, but you can really go to those 3 scenarios right there where you got 6 points on 3 trips inside the 3.
Yeah, they needed 7 in a couple of those spots. There's no doubt about it. They weren't able to punch it in. Big factor there as well. And the third thing I think that I thought was a coaching issue is I thought Alabama was really late adjusting to A&M's blitz, right? By the time Alabama had kind of solved the blitz, it had already done so much damage that they were in too much of a jam. I mean, you almost got the feeling that they were going to, and I know Alabama doesn't do this procedurally on the sideline when they're coaching players up, but you almost got the sense that they were just going to fix it at halftime. You better fix it now. And it just drive
that, or
after
you
drive.
got to change your approach. Like if you can't adjust to pressures, 5-6 man pressures, you can't go empty ever.
Yeah.
You can't go empty backfield. It got to the point where, and I understand a number of times Alabama would motion Brian Robinson back into the backfield. Okay. But there were times where they went straight empty. And I'm thinking, A&M brings 5 here. Bryce better have an understanding of his hot situation.
And
because
that hot better be white
better
hot.
come out quick.
Yeah.
And they would do this and the ball wouldn't come out quick.
Right.
And so, we can talk about Chris Owens, his struggles at right tackle, and he certainly had them against a 6-year senior, especially in Michael Clemens. But I'm with you. Just in terms of their approach, you were left to scratch your head a few times. And again, look, this isn't to throw Bill O'Brien under the bus because maybe there were things in place that just did not get executed. Maybe there were mistakes made by players. We're not privileged to that. But again, there were some formations after a while and some things that they were looking to do. You were like, make a concerted effort like you did on the opening possession to get the ball to the flats quick, run off some of this coverage. They had some success with that early, kind of went away from that, and the pressure was just a real problem. And meanwhile, again, Alabama's pressure, not a problem for A&M. They did a hell of a job picking it up.
They did. Will Anderson, relatively quiet for Alabama, for sure. But, yeah, as you said, if you're running empty backfield and you're taking on blitzes, your hot route better not even really be a route. Guy better be open without a route. You know what I mean?
Right now.
And
that's where their RPO game with Tua and even a little bit with Mac, they weren't as much RPO, I don't think, with Mac. They would devastate you if you tried to bring that stuff. But I don't think they're as good in the RPO game right now. And that's not all on the quarterback. Some of that has to do with newness at wide receiver, and there's still a continuity that's needing to take place between a new coordinator, a new quarterback, even Jamison Williams, as great as he's been. I'm sure there are some things they're still working through with him. But it's tough. And even when they were one back with no tight end, or had the tight end flexed, I'm like, you better get a tight end. You better get some guys tight in these formations because safeties, linebackers, they were just raiding the A gaps and any gap they wanted.
They were coming in the A gaps, they were hitting the B gaps, and what would happen sometimes, and I think they were trying to get Alabama's offensive line to collapse a little bit, and sometimes they'd fake that inside blitz, and the offensive line would collapse, and now here comes the guy off the edge.
Yeah, and they had it was like me on some New Year's Eves in a previous life. You start losing it out of both ends, so to speak, and then you're in real trouble, right?
Yeah.
You can't, you just want one end of it to stop. But there were times where you're right. The edge rush was still a problem, even when they didn't blitz. But for at least a solid half, as you said, they really didn't have any answers for it.
No, they did not. Plenty to fix. What if you're Nick Saban, Travis? What's the first thing you try to get squared away in practice this week?
Well, you know what he's going to talk about. He's going to talk about what he talked about after the game Saturday night. Do not let a failure go to waste. I think we're going to hear that during his Monday presser. I have little doubt about that. And so, and he can honestly sell to this team. I think it's as much about psyche right now. And just their approach in general from a mindset perspective. Everything's still in front of them. I mean, they fell to like 5th in the polls, I guess, on Sunday. So, they still take care of business. The silver lining in all this is that A&M has already blown its own foot off pretty much with losses to Mississippi State and Arkansas. Where this would have really hurt would have been if this had been Ole Miss last week. Or another Western Division team that doesn't have a loss or two by the time Alabama sees them. But, I think he'll have their attention for sure because he can go to Mississippi State and say, look, these guys the previous week went in and did something you couldn't do. They won at Kyle Field. And so that will help him in relation to the 41-0 game in Tuscaloosa last season, where Alabama just absolutely dominated State and it never really was a game. So that's where, Chase, that's where it's going to start more than anything else.
Big night for Jamison Williams. Can't go unmentioned before we move on, Travis. Over 100 yards once again. He catches the deep ball late that really put Alabama in a great position to win the game. You talk about a guy who's been a little – savior's too strong a word because there's too much talent on that offense for that word. But you talk about a guy who's come in and kind of asserted himself in a major way. He's really done it.
13 targets Saturday night. He catches 10 balls for the 146 and a couple of touchdowns. You're right. What he's brought to them, what they needed so much, and give Nick Saban and that staff a lot of credit. They came out of spring practice and probably even before the end of spring practice understood we've got to get a dynamic dude in here to go along with John Mechie and these tight ends. And he's been everything they could have hoped for from that perspective. I still like John Mechie a lot. I know his numbers in terms of yards per catch and touchdowns aren't what a lot of people anticipated from him this season, but he is sort of the holdover from the previous group that plays with a physicality that they don't have enough of right now. Their perimeter blocking, as you know, it's not where it was in previous years, and that was with first rounders blocking for one another. But Mechie still gives them some of that. I thought he had a couple of plays Saturday night where, he really sold it out, trying to make a few extra yards, whatever he could do. But drops were a problem for them, really, other than Jamison Williams. I mean, How many times was Jaleel Billingsley targeted in the game and he doesn't have a catch?
Yeah.
And he had the big drop there late on that last drive on the 3-and-out.
Big drop. Yeah. Throw just a little bit low, but that one was on
Catch the
Billingsley.
ball.
Yeah.
I mean, catch the ball. You're not in traffic. Mechie had one or two, I think, that were, probably balls he should have come up with, but at least there was some traffic there.
Right.
For Billingsley on the
He's
last
all by
one.
himself.
And just catch the ball.
Yeah. Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. Moving on, going to thank our sponsors now. We're going to start by telling you about North River Dental Associates and Dr. Jack Smalley and that great staff of dental hygienists over there right off of Watermelon Road. All your family's dental needs, they will take care of them. Easily located at 1100 Fairfax Park. Whether you need cosmetic dentistry, laser dentistry, endodontics, dentures, the always popular teeth whitening services, they're also doing Botox and Juvederm services over there now. If you want to get those facial features tightened up a little bit, the place to go is North River Dental Associates. You could call them at 752-3506 for an appointment. They're going to get you in and out of the chair in less than an hour on a typical routine cleaning. They'll get you in and out of two chairs, the waiting room chair and the dentist chair, in less than an hour on a routine cleaning. They're great with that. Online, it's northriverdentist.com. So give them a call or schedule an appointment on the website. It's North River Dental Associates.
I'm going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa as well. We are on approach to Halloween, and for the finest in your treats for October the 31st, it is Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. You got those holiday gifts you're starting to ponder as well. Well, they can take great care of you in that regard as well. 205-752-0211. Peterbrook Chocolatier, the champions of chocolate.
Finally, I want to tell you about our corporate sponsor, and that. Check that.
Hit it. The action.
The official sports betting partner with the NFL. It is the DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $1 on any NFL game and win $100 in free bets if either team scores a point. The last 0-0 tie in the NFL was 1943, 70-some years ago. It's a no-brainer. Go to that DraftKings Sportsbook app, jump on there, place a $1 bet, and you'll get $100 in free bets if either team scores a point. Use the promo code TPPN if you're watching on YouTube. There you see it right there, the Pigskin Podcast Network acronym. Throw down $1 on any NFL game, get $100 in free bets. That's promo code TPPN this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. And moving on here on the Talkin Tide podcast, Travis, will look around the Southeastern Conference this past week a little bit and some interesting action for sure. I guess we'll start with Georgia kind of dominating things against Auburn, 34-10, the final score there. The Dogs roll. The Dogs, at least at this moment now, looking like the best team in the conference. Your thoughts on how I was able to catch about a half of that game, and I kind of peeled away and went elsewhere on the dial when it was clear that Auburn wasn't going to be able to pull it back together.
Yeah, we talked about this. If you knew going into the game that Bo Nix was going to have to throw it upwards of 40 times on Saturday, it probably wasn't going to mean good things for Auburn. Auburn, as expected, struggled to run the football. Tank Bigsby, not much of a factor against that Georgia defense that continues to just dominate. And sort of that methodical approach. I've talked about Kirby Smart, Georgia, more along the lines of 2008 Alabama, and there's still a lot of that with this team. Stetson Bennett, efficient, hit a couple of big plays against man coverage in the passing game, did some good things with his legs, something he brings to that offense that JT Daniels does not. But Auburn, if it was going to have a chance, had to be able to run the football for 125, 150 plus, somewhere in that neighborhood, keep it all off of Bo Nix. And It was just a typical Georgia performance in relation to what we've seen. But before Saturday, they know who they are. They do not suffer from an identity crisis in any form or fashion. They're going to dominate both lines of scrimmage. Had a big injury at left tackle, seemed to overcome that just fine during the course of the game. And you said it. I don't think there's any doubt right now. You can look at any other team in college football as the top team in the sport. Right now, anyway. I wonder a little bit about Georgia's ceiling based on the passing game and the quarterback play. But right now, it's Georgia.
They don't need to be getting dragged into shootouts,
No.
right? That's going to be the Achilles heel for Georgia if they stumble once or twice. But it's interesting at quarterback because last year Stetson Bennett was the guy. He loses the job. JT Daniels comes in at the end of last year, looks really darn good, and Georgia fans are kind of wondering where's JT Daniels been all year. And then this year, it's kind of flipped around, I guess, with the way Stetson Bennett has stepped in for Daniels. Quarterback on the other side, yeah, Bo is not the answer. We've talked a little bit about Bo before at Auburn. I think one of Bo's problems is he doesn't take anything off the ball sometimes when he needs to. He'll throw to the flats, to the backs, and like middle screens. He'll throw those with like slant mustard on it, and Freddie Kitchens used to do that for Alabama, So sometimes those backs need a little something taken off of it, Sometimes I think Bo needs to recognize when touch is needed maybe a little bit more, but he's not the answer.
I think their help outside isn't good enough right now either. In fairness to Nix, he did make a couple of throws I thought in the game that were really good throws that his receivers just could not come up with the football. So, yeah, Georgia just continues to roll. And I know we'll talk about this later in the week, but who would have thunk it? Basically, the SEC Eastern Division Championship game coming up this week with your UK Wildcats and the Georgia Bulldogs.
Kentucky 42, LSU 21. I didn't see it coming, but I should have seen it coming.
Yeah.
We all should have seen it coming, right?
I picked LSU because it would have been the most LSU thing ever. After, what we saw the previous week, the collapse against Auburn late, and it just would have made total LSU sense for O to go into Lexington and get a win. But, man, I'll tell you right now, Kentucky's not having any of that. They took control of that game, that defense, that run game. Stylistically, I don't know if it's a problem for Kentucky or if it's a good thing for Kentucky with this Georgia game coming up. Part of me wonders that it might be a similar fate as what we saw with Arkansas trying to play that kind of game too a couple weeks ago in Athens. But that's another team. You talk about identity. Mark Stoops' team knows exactly who it is, and it starts with Christian Rodriguez and that run game. And Will Levis at quarterback had an excellent game against LSU Saturday night.
The track meet this week in the SEC, Ole Miss and Arkansas. That final score 52-51. So Lane Kiffin avenges that loss to Arkansas from a season ago. A tough loss for Sam Pittman's team. Hot start for Sam Pittman this season. He's caught a couple of losses now, but that's a big win for Kiffin, and certainly probably an even bigger win for Matt Corral.
Sam with the Cojones Award for the week, going for 2 there to try to win the game late after the touchdown at the very end of regulation to cut it to a 1-point Ole Miss lead. 68 combined points in the second half in Oxford. That'll wake you up on a Saturday, one of those noon Eastern games, but a lot of fun. Both quarterbacks played damn good football. KJ Jefferson for Arkansas was great. Matt Corral for Ole Miss was great. Just maybe we should have known right then between that game and Oklahoma, Texas, that we were going to have at least one more of those kind of games before the clock struck 12 Eastern time.
OU, Texas, man, another one that was wild. It was a crazy, crazy Saturday.
Yeah, it was. Absolutely. A lot of zany football.
It's going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. Be sure to join us midweek on Wednesday night. Travis and I will be here again breaking down Alabama's upcoming road game against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. For Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread of NFL.com and Crimson Cover Television. We'll talk to you midweek right here on Talkin Tide.